Nice to see you all. It's about 10 years ago now since I came to Bhutan for the first time. I was working with the Danish development assistance to Bhutan. So that didn't really have anything to do with the nuns. But when I came to Bhutan, I had one of these journeys that was going to be life-changing for me. So I'm going to tell a little bit about Bhutan and Bhutan nuns. And so I worked at that office, and I got to know a lot about the Bhutanese way of life and culture. And I got like so curious about these nuns, because usually I come from Denmark, and it's a Protestant culture, so we don't have these nuns and monks around anymore. I think there might be a few Catholic nuns in the whole country of Denmark, but that's all. So I've been mainly exposed to like Dalai Lama, Matthieu Ricard, these male practitioners of this Buddhism. And I was very curious when I looked and saw that it was actually nuns. And they are like the male, like shaved heads, red robes. So it could be a little tricky to see actually if it was a man or a woman. So when I found out, oh, it's actually women, I was so intrigued and wanted to find out more. So my background is in journalism and photography. So I had that kind of curiosity when I meet a new place and new people. So when I had time off at the office, where we were mainly working with health and education and good governance issues, I would run off in my weekends and in my holidays to go to the nunneries. And they would usually be a little way from the towns, or some of them quite remote out in the rural areas. And that was, really a nice experience. Maybe I had a kind of idea about like it was like Catholic nuns, hiding behind a big wall and only looking out a small little window, since that's what I've been seeing in movies. But when I came to the nunneries here, Buddhist nunneries, it was completely different than I imagined. They were really, really, really kind and really curious and open towards me when I came there. So, of course, in the beginning, I was just like interested and wanted to know more. And I think they could sense that kind of interest. So they let me stay there, spend the night there, eat with them, meditate with them, and walked all over the place with them. And Bhutan is like this Buddhist country. It's like Vajrayana Buddhism, similar to the Tibetan Buddhism, just kind of another lineage here, which is the biggest one. There's like Drukpa Kagyu and Nyingmapa, which are the biggest schools in Bhutan. But it's very similar to Tibetan Buddhism. So I would be very curious and find out more about that. But it was a bit difficult sometimes because of our language issues. Since I speak English and Danish, but they don't, of course. Some of them might have been taught a bit English in schools before they joined the nunnery, and others might have been coming to the nunnery since they were really small. Maybe they didn't have parents to look after them and take care of them. So some small nuns joined the nunnery. So they didn't have English there. Other nunneries, you would find that they actually also were taught English, a little bit English. So it was a bit difficult, but of course you can communicate in many other ways. So I would just follow them, and we'd have a great time just trying to understand each other. And I remember one particular nunnery, which was quite remote, and it was teenage nuns there. They were around 14, 15, 16, some of them. and they didn't want to go to school anymore. So they went to the nunnery and asked if they could take the vows that they do as nuns, and they were accepted there. So they stayed there and in small huts. So actually they lived very, very simple life. Some of them in dormitories, and other nunneries is like small huts which they built themselves. And then there's the main temple where they go and do their rituals and meditations and prayers. So these teenagers, they did know a little bit of English and would be very curious to know about Denmark. Oh, US, they would say, US. And I said, oh, no, not exactly US. Oh, but similar to US. And I'll say, yeah, okay, because that kind of idea about the world, and they had not really a clue about that, not really an idea. But that was okay. We went on talking about different stuff, and they would say, at that time I was about 28. So they would look at me and say, 28? And you're not married yet? Something wrong with you? And I would say, no, in my country it's really, really normal. Really? Because in Bhutan there's a tradition of getting married earlier on for the most part of people. But okay, so they were kind of figuring out if they could help me in any way. So they would ask, so Marie, do you want us to find you a business husband? And I was like, no, I'm not really sure, but we could help you. So yeah, but I'm not really sure about that. You don't want kids? You don't want family life, Marie? Now they had a good idea. So they looked at the wall in their little hut, which had a lot of newspapers and magazines all over the place with pictures, different kinds of gurus and the king of Bhutan. And so they'd point to a picture, which was at the time it was the crown prince. Point to him and say, what about this guy, Marie? Huh? He's very, very handsome. And I said, yes, he's very handsome. They call him the Asian Elvis, I believe, because he's like really handsome, so good looking. Dark hair and this down here. And okay, so I said, yeah, but maybe I'm not really into the royalty just now. Let's wait and see. Okay, Marie, now we know you want to become a nun with us. And I said, but I'm really not sure. I'm just examining what you're doing. I have no idea about nuns' life. I don't know what it is. Oh, really? You don't have nuns in Denmark? I said, no, we don't have. It's like hundreds of years ago since we had nuns. Oh, really? That was so weird to them. And for me, this was like the most weird thing, that you could actually choose a life as a nun. For me, that was the most tragical thing to do ever, I think. But so they said, okay, so you want to become a nun with us? No problem, Marie, we can do it tomorrow. We'll just shave your hair, get your robes, and you can take your vows when the teacher comes. No problem. And I was like, okay, easy. Let's see how it goes. So, as you see, I didn't become a nun, not exactly. But I had a really good time, and I met so many kind and wonderful nuns. And they made a huge impact on my thinking and my way of life. So that's actually why I think after a little time, really going there and in different nunneries and getting to know them and making great friendship with them, I decided this is a good story. I need to tell this story. So that's why it ended up with this photo book with lots of like pictures and small text, and also the personal story of mine about meeting them. So another nun I met was actually Dorji here. And she was quite interesting in the sense that she had lived a lay life as a mother of a child with her husband in the countryside with her parents. They were living there. In Bhutan, they have this in parts of the country that it's the woman who inherits the farm and the farmland, and the husband moves to them to be helping out. It's like 70% of the population in Bhutan are still living in the countrysides. So Dorji had that interesting story that she actually left her husband and her son, who was 5 at the time. And I was like, whoa, can you really do that? Is that allowed somehow? Like, I don't know, but in my thinking, it's like really weird. But as I came to talk more with her, I would understand that she had that wish from when she was little. She really, every time she saw the nuns and monks in the red robes, she would have that wish that one day she would become a nun. She told me like that. And she said, but my parents really wanted me to stay with them and get a husband, because that's a really valuable work situation in the countryside, to have the children and to maintain them, like having them to work there. So that's what she did, as she thought would please her parents. And so when he was 5, she still had that strong wish to become a nun. And she told me that she told them she wanted to become a nun, and she asked her sister if she could take care of her son, which is also pretty normal in Bhutan, that the family will help you take care of the kids if you, for some reason, can't take care of them. Or maybe they live in a town where there's a better school facility or stuff like that. So you will move the child to whatever is better. So that's what she did, and she came to become a nun. And I'm still have a nice friendship with Dorji. And she said it was okay, I told her story. And I thought it was very moving that she went back to what was her wish from the beginning. Yeah. Another lovely lady I would meet. Okay, like I'm just showing you, maybe you can take a look in the book later if you're interested, but a lot of people say, is it really like female? Because you can see like they have that kind of neutrality, or what you call it. Yeah. But that's a part of the thing they choose, not to have too much vanity, to follow the footstep of the Buddha, which were told at that time that nuns and monks should live like this. And that's also why it's maybe it's a way of the Buddhist path to do like this. And I think for some people it's a really good path, and for others we have to walk maybe a different path. So I would meet also Shofal Palmo. Here she is, beautiful, strong lady, and her English was really good. So now I was really in the mood for asking questions about the philosophy of life, like what is karma? What is that, idea about continuation of life and life circles, and what is the samsara? And I would ask all these things which I had no idea about them. It's like funny because I really didn't have any clue about Buddhism, not like as a personal path when I went to Bhutan. Maybe I had some Hinduism and Buddhism in school, but not much. So I really needed to know a lot, and she was really educated, and she said, oh, but Marie, we would talk a lot about that. She would tell me that the whole thing was my idea about my ego. So I would be settled in that little cabin, like a little hut in the night, and I was just like, mind was all over the place. I don't know how to say it, but it was like really a nice experience to get to know all these ideas, which I didn't know before. And she had a really amazing story too, because she would be in this nunnery in the middle of Bhutan. You see, like, imagine all these mountains and the temples on top of them, or just, you know, remote from the village. She would have 3 other sisters in the nunnery, and her mom and dad would live just nearby in a small house, and they had also chosen to get into the ropes and shave their heads. And even though they had a like normal lay life in their old days, all they wanted was to get close to the temple. And her dad, because he's a man, of course he's not maybe into all the daily activities and rituals and what they are taught, but he would just go around his koras around the temple, do his omani peme hung, round and round each day, and that sort of practice. And then they had one more sister, so they were 5 sisters, but she, for some reason, was in the village and had chosen to have a child. But it was quite extraordinary to have like a whole family in the nunnery. So what I was surprised by was actually the kindness they showed me. I think I never felt like so welcome before than to entering into these strange, for me, strange places. At least I was a stranger. And then feeling welcomed and feeling really accepted. And that's what I took from there, that feeling. And sometimes also just being with them in the prayers. They would do chantings and rituals with all their instruments and drums. And so just sitting there, I felt like really peaceful. And like something weird kind of space inside me the door was just like open to that. So when I came home back to Denmark after living in Bhutan for a year, I would find a Dharma center straight away. Because now I was really hooked. I wanted to know more about all this. And of course there was a Dharma center not far away from where I live, and they had Tibetan nuns coming to do church dances. If you know about that, that's with a drum. So I was really lucky like that to be able to go on exploring what was happening here. I want to tell you a little bit more about Bhutan. So does any of you know, anyone been there or know some people been there? No. Okay, so it's a small tiny kingdom in the Himalayas, just below Tibet, and then you have India to the south. So it's like a small country, like the size of Denmark, if that's relating to anything, but that's quite small. And it has like it's the high Himalayas to the north, and when you just drive like 6 hours to the south, you pretty much come to the border of India, where it's like more tropical. You have oranges and mangoes. So that's kind of big diversity within a small country like that. And it's a Buddhist country. It means like it has state religion, is this sort of Buddhism, called Drukpa Buddhism. It's a developing country. So that means that I was there with work where we are doing poverty reduction. So that's a Danish government assistance who's trying to do that with different developing countries. And Bhutan, so Denmark has been working there like 35 years now. And that's because it's different from our welfare societies, right? The Bhutanese themselves have this kind of idea that gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. So in the 70s, they were kind of opening up to the world. In the 60s, it would still be like really a closed country to the outside world. They were not even built a road yet going from west to east. So they would start doing that kind of developing the country, opening it up, modernization. And the king would say, so to our people, gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. Because Bhutan would look to the outside world and see how are they doing out there? Are they happy around there, or what is their focus around? And that was around economic wealth and consumerism around the world. So Bhutan would say, is this the way we want to go? So they were coming up with this philosophy of gross national happiness as a way of trying to find their own path, their own way into the modern world, because they wanted to have a socio-economic development so that people were not living in poverty and not starving. So they really wanted some kind of development. So that was one pillar that they built this gross national happiness upon. And then they had good governance as an important pillar. And that has to do with that for 100 years Bhutan was a kingdom led by the king. And they wanted some kind of good governance and democratic change. So in 2008, they had the first national election, and 2013, the next one. So it's one of the youngest democracies in the world. But good governance was important for this development. When the king wanted to, get off the throne? What is that? Abdicate, yes. Some people were crying a bit and saying, oh, but he's done so much good for our country. He's almost like a saint to some Bhutanese. And always looking for others' welfare. So they were like, oh, can we really handle this? Now it's the people who's in charge. Can we do that? So they had a lot of doubt about that. But he said, oh, but it's better that maybe if the next king is not really good, what do we do then? So it's better to, in this peacetime, give democracy to people. So that was the second one. So the third one is Bhutan has an aim of preserving both the culture and also the nature. So they are really dependent on the nature. And if there's too much melting of ice up high in the mountain, you'll have a lot of damage done. So they are really aware of that they have to live in harmony with nature. That's a part of the Buddhist idea also, and also what the belief before Buddhism. It has kind of, the Buddhism they have is kind of mixed with Bon religion, which was there before, where you have the idea of that there's spirits and everything is alive. You have beings everywhere, so you cannot just harm the ground or the trees or the rocks, and something can happen to you. So that kind of idea flew into the Buddhist ideas here. So that's an idea of balancing yourself with the environment. And so as part of that idea, they do try to preserve nature and environment. So 72% of the country is covered with forest. And you have an idea of maybe becoming the first organic country without using pesticides, fertilizers, and stuff like that. It's not there yet, but that's the aim. So you'll have a lot of ideas like that, preserving the nature. And I think for a developing country, that's really an kind of activist idea. I mean, some other developing countries have have other challenges and other kinds of development, but this was primary goals for this gross national happiness idea, that the whole idea of being here is to try to see if we can be happy and not just be here for consumerism or wealth or economic growth. So a kind of balancing idea, and the cultural part has to do with the religious stuff also, because maintaining their religion means so much to Bhutanese people, because most of people are Buddhist, and some are Hindus also, and a little minority are Christians, but like the main part are Buddhists and base their culture upon that. So that's really important for the people to kind of preserve that in any way they can. But again, when you modernize the country and look out to the world, and you have a lot of influences coming in, you had in 1999, they were opening up television. They had television and internet coming into the country. So more or less from no TV channels at all, and then till 40 satellite TV channels. It's kind of an impact on people's mindset and the view into others' life. The gross national happiness idea is also to balance the traditional with the new modern life. So they got a whole, from that idea, from the king said that, then it has been like this philosophy they wanted to develop. These days they also try to measure it, because that's really important to some communities or in some places, that you can measure what you're talking about. So they do this gross national happiness measurement on the people with lots of indicators and stuff to see. They see that as an instrument for policies to change, for the government to see, oh, but this field is not, people not happy here, we have to do something about it. So that's a really interesting point in Bhutan too. There's a lot to say about it. I mean, but that's an important perspective. And also in terms of the religious part of Bhutan, which is really visually there. When you come to the country, you will have like lots of these prayer flags, temples in the mountains, nuns and monks walking around, and you'll have lay people with every house have a prayer room. And they put a lot of effort into that, to offering water, flowers, to do their prostrations. I mean, there's so many methods in this tradition. So it could be everything from prostrations and chanting and songs and prayers that they do. So for people in general and for the philosophy of gross national happiness, nuns and monks are important, because they kind of sustain this tradition and help people in the villages with rituals, prayers, and of course they are sustained by their teachers, by the lay people in the villages. So it's a kind of interaction. And today these nunneries also serve like a kind of, sometimes just like it's a cultural and a religious institution primarily, but also kind of kids' home. You could say like people without parents, sometimes they come here to be taken care of. So it has like multiple purposes, the nunneries and monasteries. Okay. I think Bhutan today, it's really an interesting country. People are so generous and kind, and from my experience was that people have this philosophy deep within them, and a lot of people are very rooted in this, and it's like shining out of them in their how they act and do with others. And then there's a new generation coming up which had the opportunity to watch television, go to the internet, and have lots of stimuli from elsewhere. So they would probably do things differently than this more traditional way. So that's very interesting to see. So another project I did in Bhutan was actually I was very curious about how is it to grow up in this kind of culture, which is quite different from mine. How is that? So together with an NGO, I would do another book, which was a collection of stories and pictures from all over Bhutan with kids and youth, and they would tell like poems, and they would tell about their everyday life, and they would take picture of it all. So we collected all that material and edited it into a book like this. I did do a book also for educational purposes in Denmark. But this one was primarily to be used in some educational workshop with this NGO in Bhutan, which is called Bhutan Center for Media and Democracy, which is educating people on being an active citizen in democracy, and how you can use your skills, how you can create NGOs yourself or support them, or how you can be a democratic citizen in a broad kind of way. So this one was about having them to speak up and having them to know that they can tell stories and they can take part. 60% of the population are youth. It means below 25. So that's like a huge part of the population. So it's like a really important thing to make them aware of the democratic changes and how they can participate. So I'm going to read you a poem, which is from Dorji Rinchen. He is from class 8 in Mongar, which is in the middle part of Bhutan. It's called The Way of Life. I swear I was born free. I was born innocent and pure. I was naked within and out, and I was clad in white. As I breathed and saw more, dust of mankind fell on me, marred the color of my cloth and my face and my heart. People cheat and get cheated. If it's how the world moves, should I move with the world, or should I pave my own way? So I find that really fascinating that he can express himself like this at that age. And also I feel like it's every individual's quest somehow to find their own way. And also it's like what Bhutan did in their development, finding out how they should put themselves in this global world and with all these possibilities. Yeah. So what I got from all this material was also the feeling of people deeply rooted in this Buddhist philosophy. How they care about their family, how they care about their friends, that these values are so important to them. How they see the difference also between the rural and urban areas, which is of course a challenge for all countries. And that was really touching. I read some of the poems quite a lot of times because they are really eye-opening yeah, so in a way, I think next project will be to do the same with Danish kids and see how we are very rooted in our culture and in our way of being brought up, and how we are also able to change our perspective on things. I think that's my bit for now. Okay. And please, we welcome questions afterwards, but now I would like to give Mémé the word.
So I've been working with the Bhutan Nuns Foundation since 2012, when I first went to Bhutan. Before that, I was working with a Japan-based international NGO called Peace Boat, which was promotes human rights, peace, and environmental sustainability. And in the last year I was working with them, we were heavily involved in the earthquake relief effort after the earthquake in Japan in 2011. And so I left working with them in 2012 and I went to Bhutan. And with my interest in NGOs, I visited about 4 NGOs in Bhutan. And that's where I met Dr. Tashi Zangmo. She's the director of the Bhutan Nuns Foundation. And that's when I was really surprised to learn that the NGO sector in Bhutan has only really been present since the year 2000. And also the nuns aren't really recognized in Bhutan like the monks are. The monks have a training program, they have monasteries, they have the government supporting them, but the nuns don't. And there's about 26 nunneries, I think, in Bhutan, and probably about 5 of them are supported by maybe well-off lamas or have more support, international support, but 21 of them are living in quite poor conditions. And some of them don't have running water, which means they don't have toilets, they don't have adequate living quarters. They live in sort of kind of wooden shacks, which is quite difficult if you can imagine, in the Himalayas in the winter, in snow. Dr. Tashi Zangmo established the Bhutan Nuns Foundation in 2009 to address these issues. And even though the patron of this organization is the Queen Mother, Bhutan doesn't have enough funds. She doesn't bring in lots of funding. So Dr. Tashi is also a really interesting lady. She's not a nun, she's a lay person. She's about late 40s. And she was the first girl in her village to go to school in the remote parts of eastern Bhutan. So most people go to the western Bhutan because that's the capital, that's where the airport is. But it's a lot more difficult to get to the east. I can't remember if there's an airport there.
Yeah, nowadays there is.
Yeah, but it's really difficult. There's hardly any roads anyway. So she used to go to school, and I think she had to trek for a little bit every day to get to that school. Eventually she got a scholarship to go to school in the capital, and then she got a scholarship to go to university in America, where she took her doctorate, do you call it, or PhD, doctor, and became Dr. Tashi Zangmo. And part of her studies was about community development and Buddhism. So she'd go over to Bhutan, and that's where she noticed how the difficulties that the nuns faced and how they weren't really recognized. So that's where she has put all her focus on. So when she left America, she went back to Bhutan, set up the Bhutan Nuns Foundation in 2009. The way I met Marie was when I was in Bhutan. I was in a hotel just using the internet, and there was this one postcard, and I asked about it, and they said, oh, it was a foreigner that was taking pictures of the nuns. So, and this was the last postcard they had, so I bought it. And when I went back to England, I contacted Marie to see if there was a way we could work together to support the Bhutan Nuns Foundation, because she was already supporting a nunnery, but I wanted to see if we could work together to support the Bhutan Nuns Foundation, because the Bhutan Nuns Foundation is the only organization that is open to helping all the nunneries and all the nuns in Bhutan. So I started selling some of her postcards and her books in England and in Japan, and talking about the Bhutan Nuns Foundation. And then in 2013, I raised funds and I got Dr. Tashi Zangmo and a well-respected nun to come from Bhutan to England to give talks for 10 days. And they gave talks in Cambridge, Whitstable, Leeds, York, London, and they came to the Buddhafield, which was really interesting. I don't know if any of you were there in 2013, if you heard them speaking. Yeah. So, Dr. Tashi is a lay person, so it was quite a hot summer, and there was a few the naked people walking around. So Dr. Tashi was taking pictures. She thought it was really funny because she wanted to show pictures to her husband. And Annie Wangmo was very, I don't know if you could say typical, because I'm not used to meeting typical, nuns, but she didn't react. She was like, oh, these people, they look like they know how to have fun. That's good. No reaction, just like, she didn't even comment after it. It was quite a while afterwards. But it was a really interesting experience for me to be with them for 10 days. And I learned a lot more about the Bhutanese culture, especially how their culture is very similar to the Japanese culture, in that it's very important not to focus no attention on yourself, not to put too much attention on yourself, and also not to be a bother at all to anybody. And this whole idea of respect for your elders, a respect for people in a higher position is really important. In Japan, that's also really important. So I found myself sort of kind of behaving like I do when I'm in Japan, very, very respectable, a bit more sort of like quiet. So that was a really amazing experience. I spoke to Dr. Tashi about a month ago and asked her what the most pressing needs were. And the main thing is they're building a training center because there's nowhere in Bhutan where the nuns, this will be the first place where the nuns can meet, they can share ideas, experiences, have seminars, have training, get resources, education. And I remember Marie telling me is when she first decided to write this book about the nuns, you first wanted to write a book, right? Yeah. She wanted to write a book, but there was absolutely no resources at all about the nuns, no knowledge, no information. So this training center would be a resource center. It would be a central place where the nuns can do all those things, and it will be the first of its kind. So that's really the main thing. They were donated land a few years ago, and they have started building, but they do need a lot more funds, really do need international help, because Bhutan is not really a wealthy country financially. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, as I mentioned before, there's a few nunneries, especially in the remote areas, because that don't have the running water, they don't have proper living quarters, and as Marie mentioned, Bhutan doesn't have a lot of roads. So especially in the eastern parts, it takes a long time to get to the eastern part, but then to get to some of the nunneries takes about a day's trek, and that's really difficult. And then you have to, once we can get the funding, you've got to get the supplies there. And if there's no roads, that also takes a lot of manpower. So it's quite a job to do that one. The other thing they need help with is they're trying to find sponsorship and an expert who can help build a standardized curriculum for for some of their education and things like learning English, because they don't have that, which is it would be a really exciting project to do. And they also need English teachers, because Bhutan they have their language, which is called Songha, yeah. But English is the language of business, and it's the language of education, and I think that was made the law not long ago by the recent king. So they need to learn English so that they can tell everyone about that, share ideas and, become more international. So they are looking for English teachers, but this is not like something, where you see some of those volunteer programs where you can volunteer for a month or something, or 3 months. Dr. Tashi does want somebody who could volunteer for a minimum of a year, and you wouldn't be put in one of those places with no running water. They would have the basic living, a living quarters and stuff, but it'd probably be, you won't have your internet and your gluten-free whatever, and your raw chocolate, I don't know, things. But you would have an amazing experience with the nuns, and this is a really such a new project, to be involved with the Bhutan Nuns Foundation. It's Dr. Tashi, and she's got 4 staff in an office. And already, since it was established in 2009, it's already done a lot of progress, just her going out to all these remote areas and just getting toilets done. So it's really interesting to be involved in this organization, because it's not like you're involved in a big organization where you can't really see what you're doing because you're just one person in a big organization. This is a small, but it's effective, and it's doing lots of good quickly. And also to be involved with Bhutan, which is an amazing country to go to. I mean, even when you land in the airport is amazing, and the tower, what do you call that tower? At the airport, the control tower is even beautiful. You start taking pictures from then, it's all like these ancient looking buildings, isn't it? Yeah. And it's, it really is like you're traveling back in time. So it's a wonderful opportunity to be involved in that. So you can help by also buying one of the books or the postcards, or fundraising, or also helping to sell the books and the postcards. Or if you wanted to go to Bhutan, you can also get in contact with Dr. Tashi, and she said she would be happy to take you to a nunnery. So you can see what that's like. That's it.